Welcome to A Photographer's Life, the channel that takes you behind the curtain into the world of professional architectural photography. Join us now for an episode with some of America's premier architectural photographers. Today's broadcast comes from a recent Zoom meeting of the Association of Independent Architectural Photographers. This discussion is led by AIAP Director Alan Blakely. We hope you enjoy the show. If you do, please let us know by liking this episode and subscribing to this channel. Now, on with the show.
I want to welcome everybody to the May 2025 meeting here of AIAP. We're talking about drone photography today. And this is something we talked about a year or so ago, but we wanted to revisit it. We've had a lot of questions and discussion back and forth. And I just wanted to open this up again for discussion. And one of the things that we talked about in our pre-meeting discussion was the fact that there's a lot of competition in the drone market right now. A lot of people doing it, a lot of people doing it cheap. And how can we differentiate ourselves and still have business? And I just wanted to kind of start out with the point that it's not about the drone. That like everything else, it's about the person behind the drone. And so the fact that our clients or other photographers may have the same drone or even a better drone doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to produce images that are the same or comparable to what we can produce. So I think we've got an advantage there. The fact that we bring the eye of an architectural photographer to the situation. So I just kind of wanted to start from that standpoint and just kind of get an idea of where everyone is as far as drone photography, and if you're offering it, and what your experience is right now in the market in May of 2025.
I've been a licensed pilot for probably 5 years or more. I've gone through 5 drones, crashed several of them. Which two? Yeah, okay, 2 for me too. Yeah, thank God that DJI has that replacement program for $100. I've told my clients that I basically consider my drone a Hasselblad with a really big tripod. And so I bring it on every shoot, and where there's an opportunity, because I want to be more than, say, 8 feet off the ground, I might want to only be 15 feet off the ground to get over a tree on an exterior. I just shot inside the Library of Congress gift shop, and we shot we took one of the shots was from a drone in a position that a human being could not get to. And it's one of the favorite shots for the architect, because you can see everything that they wanted to see in a way that was not possible from the ground. So I, just got off the phone with that same client for another shoot and said, "Hey, the drone will be there. We'll do video if you want it. We'll do stills if you want it. If not, that's fine. But it's always part of my kit." And I would say that it gets used a decent amount of the time on exteriors, and the quality is excellent, and it's no more or less expensive than any of my other photos.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Jack, on that. I use it. I don't use it as an aerial platform necessarily. I use it in place of what I used to do with my 12-foot tripod and my 40-foot mast.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't fly real high with it necessarily. I mean, there are situations when I have to do like a grid view or something, but for 90% of what I do, I'm under 50 feet, and I'm usually under 25 feet. I'm flying at the roof line because I don't want to see the roof.
Right.
And I want to get a view that's a little bit elevated. In fact, I shot a job this past week where the architect called me afterward and he said, I never saw that because
Right.
we never stood up on a ladder or anything and were able to see that view, because it was a view that showed some mountains in the background, and you really couldn't see it unless you were up 15 feet. And so
Mhm.
it wasn't really aerial, it was just elevated. And that's the way I use that platform. And because I'm the age I am, I also use it so that I can get around a building in a hurry.
Common sense. Yeah.
The has anyone else flown a drone inside a building? I've done it twice now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
I did in Chicago last year. I flew one inside of a storage unit. Yeah, and it was pretty cool. You know, they asked for it. I thought that was kind of unusual, but we did it. Made a little video out of it. They loved it. Public storage.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've done that too, in a pretty much for the same perspective as you guys have been saying. But I, the thing I really want to try to accomplish with any drone shot is I don't want people to even think about it being shot from a drone. I just want them to think about how great the shot is, more so than if I went sky high and shot so far up above that it's all about the roof.
Right.
Then trying to give the message that we're after, and that is great photography. It's just another tool, and mine goes with me on just about every assignment, and I love using it. It works.
So I have shot, I'm sorry, I have shot really high several times, mainly for landscape, but architects who have a plot that they've designed on paper, and then this allows them to have a photograph of what does it look like now 2 years later once everything's grown in. And that might be shot at 400 feet or 800 feet in order to match one to one with their drawing. But you're right. Yeah, the tops of buildings are ugly. But sometimes trees and plants and stuff are worth shooting from a height.
I was just saying my approach, I've been involved with drones probably at least 10 years, but I don't own a drone. My assistant, I have two different assistants and they have the drone. So Ellen and I talked about this before on one of these calls. When I'm using the drone mostly at twilight for commercial buildings, I'm on the ground shooting, okay, twilight, and he's up in the air, and I'm glancing at his monitor, and that just works out better for me if we have both on the ground and up in the air, especially in the twilight since we have such a small window to shoot. Some of my drone operators in the past, they were a little bit more of a daredevil. Like we've been downtown Portland and they're dodging buildings, not bullets, buildings. Some of the younger assistants that I have, they're pretty agile with the drone uh, stick moving it around. But I'll probably have to give in and get my own sometime. But anyway, I just like having two cameras at the same time, so to speak, on the twilight shoot. So that's just my philosophy on it. And I believe, and maybe, and tell me I'm wrong, which I probably am. I believe on my Canon, I'm gonna have a little bit better dynamic range, and I'm pretty good on the ladder than with the drone shots. But maybe most people can't tell the difference between the high-end drone finished image and a shot that's done with the Canon, 5D Mark IV. So anyway, you want to have them close. You don't have a big difference, but I just like the quality I get. So Alan, I know about the ladder, but I have somebody holding my ladder. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've still got my 50-foot camera mast. If anybody's interested, it has a motorized head. It's really nice,
Yeah, but
but it
yeah.
weighs a ton. So I don't use it anymore. But one of the things, though, that I think, my hesitation in, or at least the differentiation between what I do and what, somebody calls himself a drone photographer does, is that my stuff I think looks architectural and their stuff doesn't. Um, and part of that is I straighten the verticals, and that's one thing I don't see drone photographers ever do, is straighten verticals, and that takes a little bit of time, or correct the distortion of that lens. And I don't care what drone you've got, those lenses need some distortion correction, and Lightroom doesn't do it for you necessarily automatically.
Alan, that's a great question about whether you correct the verticals on a drone shot, and I believe it's a certain level, certain height of the drone. It's
Absolutely. Yeah,
and tell me if I'm wrong again. If you get too high and you correct the perspectives of verticals, it looks a little bit wonky. It
it's
just
going to
doesn't
look
look right.
stupid. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I did a lot of research on. on other photographers and other drone shots to say, what point do you start correcting the verticals on a drone? So I think it's subjective on that.
Yeah, I think it's totally subjective. There is a point where it's not going to look right. It's going to look like, oh yeah, he's corrected verticals. But
Yeah.
if you're down in the, in the range that Jack and I were talking about earlier, and you don't correct the
Hmm.
verticals, or if you're rolling video and you've got your pitch angle somewhere, more than 5 degrees either way, negative or positive, if your pitch angle is up or down quite a bit, it's going to look wonky. And I think that's one of the things. I mean, I hate to jump to video all of a sudden, but if we're rolling video, which a lot of us are doing, the pitch angle is going to make a big difference in how cinematic the video looks. And so I try to keep my pitch angle as close to zero as possible. And when I talk about pitch angle, that's that's this angle here, and as close to zero as possible. And then I've also adjusted my camera setting, my gimbal settings, way down from what the factory settings are, in order to have a cinematic look to things. Because like I use the Mavic 3, and out of the box, that thing is just a twitchy mess. And unless you adjust those gimbal settings pretty dramatically, you're not going to have a video that looks anything cinematic. And so, I mean, I'm happy to share my gimbal settings, but you've really got to adjust those down and slow them down so that it looks like there's a camera operator that's actually making those moves. And doing that kind of thing, and that makes a huge difference. Because I get a lot of times I'll get on site and I'll have a client say, well, our superintendent has a drone and he's already flown video of this project, so you don't need to. It's like, well, yeah, and he's probably shown you the rooftop and it's 100 miles an hour, and that's probably not what you're going to want to put on your website. So so I'll go ahead and roll something, and then it looks cinematic and polished, and it looks like something that they can be proud of. So anyway, that's
you know how we all edit differently, and everybody's photos look different than everybody else's. I don't do the drone myself. I don't want to do the drone. It's just beyond what I want to do. And so I have two guys that are really good. They both edit their stuff, though, quite differently than each other, and they edit differently than I edit, with the intensity of the color and everything else. And so what I do with both of the guys is they just give me their raw work, not raw camera, but just their work unedited, I should say. And then I edit all the aerial stuff myself so that it ends up having the verticals that I want, and that it has the intensity of color and everything else the way I want it. And it ends up looking like my other still shots. And my agreement with them is such that I can put my logo on those photos that they take for me, because they've been paid to do that for me. And so it's all my stuff. And as far as the client's concerned, I did the aerial as well. And I don't do the aerial. I administer it a little bit. I say, no, I want that shot over there. I'm out there in the field with them when they're doing it, but I just don't do the aerial because I don't want to get into that.
So is that a work for hire agreement that you have then with them, Glenn?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that they just plain, it becomes my property and I can put my logo on it and I can sell it and everything, and because they've been paid for their work.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So.
I think the other thing that differentiates us from the run and gun folks that Norman were talking about for $90 is composition.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
the rules of composition don't change just because you're 30 feet up. And Alan's comment about getting high enough to see the mountains in the background, and the straight verticals and everything else. I mean, that's also what differentiates us, is we know what a good, well-composed photo is supposed to look like, regardless of whether it's from a drone or, from a terrestrial camera.
Yeah, Jack, that's what I meant too. My cropping of their photos is completely different than the way they give them to me. So yeah, the cropping is very important.
Alan, I had another question just for the whole group.
Mhm.
So I started shooting aerials before drones out of helicopters.
Yeah.
And so yesterday I had a discussion with a client, and the marketing director that's over her says he used to shoot with a photographer in Arizona that had used the helicopter. Last time I used the helicopter was probably 2, 3 years ago.
Mhm.
And I just want to see everybody's kind of feedback on how you describe now the helicopter can get a lot higher, but it's obviously more money and you're restricted, of course, obvious restrictions. But to sell a helicopter shot compared to a drone shot, um, I don't know. Are people even shooting out of helicopters anymore? Or is it just all drone most of the time?
I I am whenever I get really close into an airport, for example, where I cannot fly my drone,
Okay.
then I would either use a helicopter, prefer a helicopter over something like a Cessna aircraft with high wing. Those are problematic in their own way. But no, I've used the helicopter quite a bit whenever I've had to, really because of restrictions.
Yeah, if you're in the Chicago, Wisconsin area, there's a fantastic helicopter pilot. He's a fly in Nam, and he's carried pilots. He knows how to do it. And the way to do that is you just schedule, several projects. Because I think the last time I think he's like $900 for a 3 or 4 hours, and if you want him for the whole day, it's like 1,600. But you can get, but he'll fly you over the projects. He holds it steady. He knows the views. He knows the angles. He's fantastic. I'd be happy to send his information if you need him.
Yeah. The issue um, with a helicopter, however, is altitude. You've got some minimums that you've got to maintain. And 500 feet generally doesn't do it for most things. And so for me, the drone is just a completely different platform. It's giving me shots that I could never get with a helicopter. And I spent thousands of hours, harnessed out of a helicopter with my feet on the skids, and everything from, R-22s to Bell Jet Rangers and things like that. So, but I would much rather put a drone up if it's at all possible than get into a helicopter.
The one job I had a couple of years ago, it was a larger space I had to photograph. It was almost like 3 city blocks. And with a helicopter, with a drone, you can't get above 500 feet.
Right. Yeah. And
And
so
so I had to get higher so that's what we
yeah,
hired.
there's
Yeah,
the difference.
not legally.
Oh, right. There you go. There you go.
I had an Amazon warehouse in Boston, and I think I went up to 1,200, maybe 1,300.
1,200.
I had to
Yeah.
get it. I lost connection several times. I thought I might lose the drone, but it was necessary to get the shot the architect wanted, and we did. We got it turned out. We processed it and cleaned it all up, but it's beautiful. But yeah,
So I believe DJI has removed the automatic restrictions with the
Yes.
latest firmware updates. So now you could fly over an airport. You're not allowed to. It's not safe to do it, and so on. But DJI no longer restricts that. They leave it up to your own common sense and training and licensing.
Yeah, you get a
So
little checkbox where you assume responsibility and
But
liability on that.
but when we're flying with remote ID, we're giving ourselves away.
Exactly.
I mean, they could know. All right, he just shot that from 1,200 feet.
oh no, there's no question about it. Yeah, I mean, there's no
Yeah, he
question.
was right over the field. So with regard to the FAA, that they do investigate every case that gets reported to them.
Mhm.
And to the extent that they investigate it is based on the seriousness of the infraction that they perceive. And so I think a one-off like that is different than somebody who's a serial infringer.
Right. Like I don't perceive Nora what you're doing is like daredevil type stuff, but oh, it
Exactly.
takes one cranky Karen on site. What are you doing with this drone?
Well, and that's something we ought to talk about because and not to jump subjects really fast, but I encounter people on every shoot, nearly every shoot that I do. I encounter people who are hostile, and you know, I'm licensed. I go through before you fly and make sure that everything is taken care of the way it needs to be. I'm permitted if I'm in a restricted airspace. I have a safety vest on. You know, I've got a lanyard with my license printed on it around my neck, and I still have people that call the cops. And it's just aggravating to the point of, you know, me wanting to be hostile back to them.
Well, I'm starting to wonder if I need to start wearing a body cam, you know.
I don't think that's a bad idea, honestly.
You told us about an incident you had last year in Detroit, where someone threatened to arrest you.
Oh, yeah, this was actually in Lake Orion. I was detained by Detective Sergeant, and I won't mention his name. If he's ever watches this, thank you very much for your time. But I was detained, and I was perfectly legal. I had permission to be in that airspace with the FAA, and it didn't matter squat to this guy. And so he came up, you know, hand on his gun and the whole bit. Bring your drone down right now, and I did, and then he detained me at the police station there, and for whatever reason, until he called whatever city manager or whatever that I'd gotten permission. I was photographing the city hall, and permission had been in place for a month to do that, but somebody got, you know, worked up, and he maintained that it was a no-fly zone. Well, it wasn't, but yeah, this happened in Lake Orion, Michigan, and I hope that their tourism goes way down as a result.
This is a good subject in that I sometimes get permissions in writing from an email or something from, you know, the owner of the building or someone, and then you get on site and the person that was supposed to know you were coming, somebody else is saying, well, I don't care, you know, who said what. Nobody told me that you were supposed to be here. And, you know, you get into all that. So one thing that's helped me a little bit on that is if I have a copy of the email with me where, you know, the big cheese said it was just fine. And then the subordinate said it was just fine. The subordinate even said they were going to meet me on site at a certain time, and they're not there and I can't find them. But at least by having that piece of paper with me, that's got me into places that I otherwise would have been detained.
That's a good idea. You know, and I've said this before, I run into the most problems with the person on site who is being paid the least amount of money.
Yeah.
That's probably true, but I agree with you, Alan, with having your lanyard with your credentials on it. You know, that's something that everybody should have, because I've snapped this off before and just handed it to authorities and then go check things out while I continue to work because you got limited time. But that's important to do.
Yeah, see, I've got my license.
Yours is bigger than mine.
Mine's big. I printed it out 4x6, and then I've got.
Oh, that's beautiful.
You know, this is on the opposite side.
Oh, I like that.
And so
you deal with older people who need the large print version. Is that what's going on?
That's really good. I just got the press pass, but
I'm the one that needs it.
Oh,
and then I've also got a vest, and Barry Schwartz put me on this, and I used to just wear a regular safety vest.
Yeah, that's what I have.
Barry put me onto this, and I'm sorry, but my video is reversed. But this one you can buy on Amazon, FAA certified drone pilot.
Oh, that's cool.
Great.
You know, do not disturb.
I like it.
And I put that on, and then on the front of it, I've got my license here again.
Press credentials, that's good.
And so I always have that on when I'm doing this. I try to
still get arrested
as possible. It's like, I don't want anybody to think I'm just some knucklehead that's out here spying on people through their windows, which is what I've been accused of, even with the vest on. But
how do you get press credentials?
Well, that's a difficult thing, and this press badge, you can buy a package of them on Amazon. These are just sew-on patches, but I think they do carry a lot of weight as far as this is who I am, this is why I'm here, kind of thing. If unless you're affiliated with the AP or the New York Times or somebody else, that's really the only way to get a bona fide credential. There are some ersatz press credentials out there that really don't carry any weight at all. National Press Photographers Association or something like that, and those are just nonsense. But sorry.
But you just bought a thing that says press, and you wear it, and there's no authority given to you, whatever.
No, but that just tells me that just tells them why I'm here. I mean, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not asserting that I'm associated with any news organization. I'm just saying this is why I'm here. And so Amazon sells these patches. They're just a cloth patch that you could just have stitched onto that vest. And I found that very helpful. I've also found that there are situations where people will flag you off because you've got that on there saying, no, we don't want any press coverage here.
Yeah, that's the thing, right?
So it's a two-edged sword on that, but it does lend some legitimacy, but it is nice. People don't generally bother you if you've got something like that on. So you don't have somebody come up saying, yeah, I've got a DJI drone too, want to talk. Like, yeah, I don't think so. But so that's an interesting thing. But I've started trying to lift off and land my drone from an inconspicuous spot, just because it's just not worth the hassle of being out in the open someplace with putting my landing pad down and the whole show, and I'd rather just do it as inconspicuous as possible and find some place that I'm not going to have people on their cell phones, which I do all the time, taking pictures of my drone as if that's going to mean anything. But I'll have people. I photographed an assisted living center recently where I had the staff out with their cell phones taking pictures of my drone, even though I had permission from the ownership and management to do this. There was some people who thought they were being vigilant, and because somebody was going to take some pictures of the assisted living center and use them somehow.
How many of you fly with a spotter? Somebody.
If I can't see the drone, absolutely.
Yeah, me too. I always fly with a spotter because I'm interested in watching what's on the monitor. I need somebody watching the drone, keep an eye on where it's at.
Yeah, especially if you've got obstacles that are of any concern.
Well, that's why I've crashed a couple of them.
Jack, we're supposed to keep that to ourselves.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If my wife's with me or my business partner, Mary Beth or Patrick or somebody, I guess I've never asked them to spot, but I guess they kind of do. But it's, I don't intentionally bring a spotter out. If I was in the city, I guess I certainly would. I've never, I've only, in fact, flying in the city, the drone shots I've done in the city, I've had a drone guy do that while I was doing the architectural work. We process it, and it's a work for hire agreement. But I've never taken a drone up in the city of Chicago myself. So I guess it's an excellent idea to have a spotter because
that in cities. I mean, I've flown in Chicago and other big cities like that, and there are enough obstacles that your avoidance system is not going to detect that it's just not worth the risk.
Yeah.
Telephone wires generally don't have enough mass to be detected. Those kinds of things, cable TV wires and things like that. And So you've got to have, and tree branches, just straight things
Tree branches without leaves.
without leaves. Yeah.
Of course.
If you're flying and there's no leaves on the trees, yeah, watch out. But dealing with the general public, I think, is a serious problem, sometimes. And I'm not sure what the answer is generally, because I'm not going to land my drone and talk to you if you got a problem with me being there. So and that's what I did with this detective sergeant that got really irritated with me. Was I said, I can't talk to you right now.
He didn't want to hear that. He didn't
No,
want
it's
to hear
like,
that.
land your drone right now.
So has anybody else had hostile encounters when you're doing drone work?
Yeah, what I did recently, but I bought the signs. I didn't use the vest, but I bought signs to put out now, and it just depends. When you're shooting twilight, you don't know if people are just hanging out having a drink or whatever, and sometimes they're just the neighbor comes out, and he was just in our face. He reported to the city council, to the city hall, and then we had to answer to some questions, which was a little bit embarrassing, but we had everything covered.
Mhm.
That just some people are just sideways on things, and that's just their nature.
Was that a residential area, David?
Well, it was no, it was a combination. It was residential, but it was a borderline with the library. So it was just kind of crossing into that area. I
Yeah.
just want to mention one of the close calls that we had in Portland. We have the PDX, the international airport, and then there's a small airport, Pearson Airport. That's the oldest airport, small airport west of the Mississippi. Okay, so it's almost parallel. It's just up a little bit from PDX. And we got clearance from PDX to be in the area doing a drone of this waterfront area. So my drone operator's cruising around, everything within what he was approved to do. And then the Cessna, I don't know if it was a 150 or 182, comes flying, landing as a student pilot, landing on approach under our drone. Okay. So our drone was above this little a private plane. And my brother's a pilot, and I talked to him about it. I said, what should I do, Bob? I called him up. I said, just get out of there. I don't care if you're approved to do it. Get out of that
Mm.
situation. Just leave. Because if you clip that little private plane, something happens. But that was the closest. And that was nerve-wracking that he was actually underneath, below our drone uh, landing, because it was a student pilot and he wasn't keeping track of where he was. So it was crazy. And I got one more. This is going to knock you guys off here, make you guys laugh. I'm shooting at a paper mill up by Seattle. It's very noisy. It's for Doosan tractors. So they're chipping up logs, making it into paper. Super loud. So I'm squatting down to get my camera out of my camera case. And the drone operator that I had is somebody new I never used before. I knew he was near me, but I couldn't hear him. Okay. So I'm down, squatting down. I stand up, and then I feel the blades of the drone hit my face. Right?
Byron?
What is going on? It's the first thing I think, okay, it did go through my cheek. My client's there and it's bleed. It didn't go through my cheek, but could have got my eye, could have got my neck. But I said, what are you doing so close? And it was the craziest thing. I've been shooting for, 43 years. And I've had some situations, but the thing actually hit, it was like a cat scratch. It had 3 scratches on my cheek.
Mm.
It was unbelievable. So that's my
That's
story for the
that's a
day.
close call. Yeah.
Yeah.
You haven't hired that guy again, I assume.
No.
Wow.
No. So anyway,
Workman's comp claim.
what's that?
Workman's comp claim.
Oh, I know. It's nuts. Yeah, I've never had one of those yet. I pay for it, but I've never had it. Hey, I wanted to ask you another question. When I was shooting helicopters, maybe first time 20 years ago, I was doing some reading on lighting, and you probably already know this, but when you're shooting a commercial building on the ground or on the ladder, you kind of want things kind of front lit, depending on if it's twilight or not, but front lit. But once you start getting up in the air with the drone or a helicopter, you want it to be side lit or even backlit. So if you're from a distance and you're front lit on an aerial, it definitely it kind of flattens it out. It's this weird phenomenon that I've learned over the years that you want to be kind of cross lit or backlit when you're from a distance. I don't know what the perfect distance is to use that principle, but for me, that makes a big difference to have more shape from an aerial um, from distance. So I don't know if you guys use that principle or that lighting technique at all. No?
I tend to shoot mine either early or late in the day.
But as far as the lighting, the cross lighting,
Mhm.
Yeah, I
when you're
think
from
he's
aerial,
talking about altitude. Is that what you mean, David? When you get up,
when you get out in the aerial, right? In the
yeah,
area,
when you're
compared to being on the
really high.
ground
Yeah,
Mhm.
and distance, when you're in distance aerial above, maybe 100 feet or whatever, 50 feet, 100, front lit is not as appealing as side lit or backlit when you're doing aerials.
Mhm.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Yeah, you
And
don't get
that's,
that
I learned that a long
modeling.
time ago, but anyway.
So Ken ask a question here in the chat window here about flying near, a Class B airport and as far as permissions and things like that, and the steps involved in that. And I know that comes up for some of us fairly frequently. And maybe we ought to kind of talk through the process of doing that, and how we get those permissions, and what the right way is to do it rather than the wrong way, so that we end up with a fine. Those kinds of things. Is there anybody here that ends up having to fly near airports on a regular basis?
Yeah, I do quite a bit. And I use air control.
Mm-hmm.
Air control, which used to be a loft,
Yeah.
and through it I can get Lance authorization
Mm-hmm.
to fly. And it's really fairly simple to do, and then I
Yeah.
just transfer it into the aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
Although now you don't even need to transfer it to your aircraft as long as you've got it on you, or the permission from Lance to be able to fly where you're at.
Yeah, that propagates into your app.
Right.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Um, I end up having to do that regularly, and the only anomaly for that is if you are, I found anyway, is flying near a government installation like an Air Force base.
Right.
Um,
Or a jail or a penitentiary.
yeah,
You
and
can't
then
you
you
can't do that.
and then you can't do that.
No.
But I have found, um, I contact the tower, and they are able to give me an unlocking code. I fly near Air Force Base here in Utah fairly often, and they will provide me with an unlocking code, um, for the DJI. It's a 6-digit code, and it's a different code every time. um, and that will get me. That doesn't get me over the field, but that gets me adjacent to the field. And then I have to tell them when. I mean, they give me a very precise window. I have to tell them what that window needs to be, and I have a feeling that they're monitoring my well, it's not a transponder, but they're monitoring my signal.
Remote ID.
Yeah, my remote ID, and so they know when I'm there and when I'm not. Um, but yeah, and they've got the ability to take me down. I understand, if I end up over their field, and I don't know what that process is, but I have read some things online where people have lost their drones, when they've gotten over a government installation like that.
What do you mean lost their drones? Like they land them for you?
They will land it for you, yeah, and
You
they will
can't
take
retrieve
it. Yeah, so I don't know I mean, it's apocryphal at this point, so I don't know what the real truth of that matter is, but
Well, they
they
can
don't
lock
have the
out
drone.
your geo connections.
Yeah,
I mean, military does it to one another.
yeah. So you're no longer able to communicate with your drone or navigate with it, and so
Right.
um, it's lost. And it probably should be if you're doing something like that. But I've never had any problems like that, and I was flying downtown San Diego, and that was a kind of a disaster because I had the international airport and I had a few other things, but I did have geofencing that I bumped right up against when it came to the jail, and that was a no-go. So I was shooting some commercial buildings. I could go pretty much anywhere I wanted to except there. And so those are situations that you have to kind of be aware of. It's best to always at least be upfront and tell people what you're doing and why, rather than just kind of wing it and hope for the best.
Well, if you're not careful, you can mess it up for a lot of legitimate flyers, people that are flying drones
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was curious, how
legally.
many times do you, or like Alan, if you encounter somebody who's hostile, are you saying like, this is none of your business, or are you saying exactly what you're doing? Like when I watch YouTube videos of encounters, it's people saying, this is none of your business, and they tend to escalate it.
No, I try to be professional about it. I'm gonna say that I'm doing I'm conducting an authorized flight. It's FAA approved. It's a commercial flight. It has nothing whatever
I
to
like
do with
that
your
word
neighborhood.
conduct. I
Yeah.
like that word conduct. I'm gonna
Yeah.
use that.
And because I was in Denver a year or two ago, and I had several people approach me. I was in an intersection flying, and I had several people approach me and said, "We don't want you looking in the windows of these apartments next door here." It's like I was photographing an office building across the street. I had nothing to do with their apartment building, but and it could have escalated and gotten ugly. And I was more accommodating than probably needed to be. And I said, look, and I just, pointed to my controller and said, this is what I'm shooting. I'm shooting this office building. And that was all it took. So
I'm also
maybe,
wondering if I and it's also the body cam, maybe bringing some like printed out photos and just give it to them like, here, this is kind of what I'm doing, and then just let them walk away with it.
yeah. And I hand people a business card so that they know that I'm just not some, knucklehead out there flying drone, because there's plenty of those. And one other thing I wanted to bring up is the fact that there's a lot of knuckleheads out there that are going to be flying around us, and I don't know how many of you have encountered that, but I encounter that fairly often, where I'm shooting something, and if it's something that's recently built or really interesting, I've got other guys that are in the air at the same time who are not authorized to be there. And so how do you handle that? That's
Yeah, I've never experienced that.
Yeah, nor me.
Yeah, and
Well, the
I've never
last time I experienced it was down at the Sphere in Las Vegas,
yeah.
and that was a really complicated permitting process. I had 3 different entities, government entities, I had to permit with to fly there, and I got there, and I had 3 other guys in the air flying around me. And it was the Eagles were opening there, and they had just arrived in their limousines and were disembarking, and I was photographing and kind of trying to do a ring around of the Sphere, and they had halted, all the tourist helicopters for the moment while I was doing that. And I've got these other guys that are just flying around willy-nilly. And so there were police there. But anyway, so I contacted the police, and they contacted Homeland Security, who then arrested all 3 of the guys that were flying there. So
Don't people have the right, I mean, for recreational to put a drone up? I think if you're not doing it commercially, you don't have to be
this
licensed.
was restricted airspace.
Oh, it's restrict. Okay, that's different.
It was restricted airspace on 3 different counts. And so they had no right to be there at all. Otherwise, yes, yeah, they do recreational, sure. There's not much
And,
you can do about it.
and most recreational shooter or drone operators haven't gone through the training we have.
No.
They don't necessarily know what the rules are,
No.
and what a restricted airspace is. And if they've got a drone that's less than 249 grams, they don't even have to register the damn thing. They just pull it out of their pocket and throw it in the air.
Mhm.
One thing that helps for me is, besides having a business card and having my ID on me, I've created several coffee table books of architecture, and I always have one of them with me, either right with me or in my car nearby. And just to prove that I'm legit, that I'm out there as an architectural photographer, that helps a whole lot. And then sometimes I've sold books that way too. It's like, yeah, you really do good work. I like this. Can I buy one of these books? You know, so that works
Sure.
too. But you know, however you can present your work on site, a stranger can't be looking up at your web. Well, maybe they could look at your website on their phone too. But you know, if you can present some kind of credentials that prove that you are an architectural photographer and you have business being there, that helps a whole lot to lower the temperature.
Glenn, you're famous. You're a famous photographer. People are supposed to recognize you.
Yeah, right. That happens a whole. I'll tell you one other thing though, is in creating, I have a series of books called Distinctive Homes of America. And for me to pick my houses, sometimes I had no idea who lived there or anything else. And if you stand outside of a multi-million-dollar house, off of the property line, right on the street, and you start taking pictures of their house, it will only take about 5 minutes before someone comes out and says, "May I help you?" Which means, "What the hell are you doing taking pictures of my?" And then you show them a coffee table book that you've done, and you say, "I would really like to have your house in my next book here for Naples because I think it's one of the best 43 houses in all of Naples." "Oh, really? Let me show you my house."
Glenn, maybe you should do that before you start shooting.
I know.
No, it works. It works.
You live and learn.
I
Live and
just let
learn.
them come out.
That's great.
So in just a couple minutes that we've got left here, let's jump to as far as marketing drone photography, high-end drone photography. Any insights that anybody might have as far as how do we differentiate ourselves from, at least to clients, of potential clients?
I don't even try to. It's, as I said, it's just a Hasselblad on a big tripod.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't, if they ask, I don't tell them what kind of lens I'm using or what kind of camera body I use. Yeah, I shoot photographs, and this is one of my tools.
Yeah, if anything, if I need to sell it, I might just assure them or remind them that have a full insurance liability for drone, specifically drone policy, because I think a lot of people, especially the run and gun people, don't have drone specific insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a lot of people, especially like in metropolitan area like Chicago, that when somebody does something really stupid, like all of a sudden they're flying over Wrigley when there's a game, which you can't do, then they make all these laws and it actually makes it harder for us.
Mm-hmm.
Remember all that crap, the drones that were being spotted out in the East Coast or whatever? Remember the government was supposed to get involved, whatever that was? That's why everybody's freaked out by it. Oh my God, they're spying on me. No, I'm not, you know. And like you said, half the time if I just show them my controller, like, here's what I'm doing, they're like, oh, cool. That's kind of the end of it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I want to circle back to something Norm and I were talking about before we came on air with this, and that's that I don't specify or line item drone photography, and I think that's what we've all alluded to just now, is the fact that it's just part of our tool bag, and I don't separate that out as a separate item. It's just one of the cameras that I use, and so like Jack was mentioning, it's a Hasselblad with wings, kind of thing, you know. And I think that's an important differentiation, because that way it becomes about the photography and not about the gear. And to the extent that we continue to make it about the photography and not about the gear, then it's, that's what differentiates us ultimately, is they're hiring us for our eyes and not for the camera in a case or whatever that we are carrying around. So
because I'm not doing the aerial photography myself, if it becomes part of the shoot, then I have to charge more for that. But the way I do it is I just ask them for what kind of shots that they want. and I find out the whole package of what they want. And then if it involves aerial photography, I give them a price that covers my expenses for that.
Yeah.
If it doesn't involve aerial, I don't talk about it's gonna or not have it. I just plain give them a different price for the scope of the work that they said they wanted.
Yeah, I think that's really wise. The fact that we, just make it as easy as possible for people to spend money with us, and not make it difficult for them to have too many things to consider. Good discussion. Thank you to everyone who's participated today. This has been really helpful. I think this will be something worth listening to again, and I'm sure that this will be valuable to those that weren't able to join us today. Please email me or give me a ring with any topics that you think might be useful for discussion next time or in future meetings that we have coming up. And I know we're heading into a really busy time, so we'll try to schedule these so that we can all attend if possible. But I know the next 3 months are going to be difficult. So we hope that you have a great summer and a successful one, and be safe. And thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
This has been another episode of A Photographer's Life. If you've enjoyed this program, please let us know by liking this episode and subscribing to this channel. A Photographer's Life is brought to you by the Association of Independent Architectural Photographers. This episode is copyrighted and may not be used in full or in part without the written permission of the AIAP. Please join us again soon for another inside look at the world of professional architectural photography.